I want to talk to you about elder abuse. Elder abuse is a separate category, and it's recognized separately by our government, both federally as well as locally. If you are someone who is elderly, you are likely to be pursued by your HOA. Call your elder abuse organizations in the city that you live in. Go on record as having asked for help. There, of course, is a problem with this. Elderly people oftentimes reach a point where they can't take care of themselves. And so the homeowners associations view this as a target. It is unlikely, nor do I know of a case myself, where a homeowners association will go to the home of an elderly person and say, you're behind on your dues, your lawn is a problem, is there some way we can help you? The problem with that is there's no money in that. There's money in fining, there's money in liens, and there's money in foreclosure. There's no money in helping a member of the homeowners association. If you are someone who believes that you're being attacked by elder abuse and affected, get help through the government. If you are the children of someone who is a parent, mother, father, grandfather, uncle, doesn't matter, you are well enough, hopefully, to reach out and lend a hand and recognize that your family is being affected. Do something now. Don't wait till it's too late. We are seeing increased suicides and deaths as it may relate to homeowners associations. I want to speak to the family members, the children who are living in HOAs. I want to speak to the adult children who have moved out of the house and now are in your own home or your own apartment, and give you a hard, cold fact about your future. It is in the normal course of life that people die. I don't think that there's anything profound about what I've just said. And although we don't particularly like to say this openly, we are the recipients of the generation that's ahead of us in terms of receiving a portion of an estate in an inheritance. Your mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles' estates are being undermined through the collection companies, the management companies, and the HOAs. And if you don't step in and do something to protect your future assets, you're going to receive nothing. I understand you may think this is cold and this is terrible, and you're talking about my mother, and I love my mother, and I love my father, and I never want to see them die. And I understand that. But the HOA doesn't care. And a good day for a collection company is more liens and more fines in a home where people are elderly, and they're going to lien that home, and when your inheritance comes in, it's going to be depleted, if not completely removed. And cases exist all across the country of homes being foreclosed on and inheritance being undermined. Take care of it now. Get active with it now. Do something about it now. Go on record now. Take some action. Protect yourself and you will automatically be protecting your family. As I've gone through and I've been presenting a lot of problems. It's my goal to have a section called solutions. And so let this represent a solution to a particular problem. You are someone who owns your home outright, or you have a lot of equity in it. Keeping in mind that I am not an attorney, and my goal here is not to give legal advice, I will tell you what I would do. If I owned my home outright, if I had a lot of equity, I would put a new mortgage on the property, raising the mortgage up so that the property was not valuable to the HOA. Now, I could do that a couple of ways. I could go to a family member who would loan me the money, and in turn, I would go ahead and pay them back or create a debt. But the property has to be liened with a legitimate title lien mortgage. From that perspective, you are protected, not completely, but protected from your HOA. So in summary, if you own your home in an HOA, which ideally is our dream is to own our home outright, owning a home outright in a homeowners association, in my humble opinion, is a very bad idea. Over time, I've been asked about homesteads. Again, keeping in mind, I'm not an attorney, and I cannot give you legal advice. But I can tell you, from my perspective, I will always make sure I have a homestead on my property. However, homesteads will not protect you from HOAs because they have what is known as a super priority lien advantage. That is, let us assume for a moment that you have to file bankruptcy for medical debt, for whatever reason, you've lost your job, whatever reason. A homestead allows you to maintain a certain portion of your equity in your home above the existing mortgage. HOAs have been given the legal right by the government to usurp homesteads. So no matter if you have a homestead or not, it will not prevent an HOA going in and grabbing the equity from your home. Let's talk a little bit about liens. It's important for you to understand that when you signed on to the homeowners association, you gave them the right to lien your property. That lien that exists can exist with your knowledge or without your knowledge. That is, a lien can be prepared but not filed, but the lien exists. But as a result of you not doing something that the HOA has demanded that you do, whether it's reasonable or not, it's completely irrelevant. They will file a lien or have the right to file a lien on your property because you didn't take your trash can in on time, because you left your garage open, because they don't like the way your garage is organized, because they don't like the pot on your front lawn, because they don't like your furniture, because they don't, and on and on and on. And remember, the they is your fellow neighbors. These are the people who are doing this to you. I want to speak to you a little bit about solution, and one that I myself cannot understand. But I am researching it and I am looking into it. I'm going to ask you to do the same. The only reason that HOAs can exist is if they're built as common area interest communities. Common interest communities. Now, to do this, the banks have to loan the money for the builder to do this. The builder must say in front, this is going to be an HOA. Now, right now, the thought might be in your mind, well, so what's the bank got to do with it? And here's the problem. Banks all over the country, I cannot speak from other parts of the world, are being hit with foreclosure fees and charges being left by owners where there's a lien on the property. And because the lien stays with the property, even the bank has to pay for it. So I pose a question to you that I've not been able to answer. If you were Bank of America, if you were Chase, if you were Wells Fargo, wouldn't you refuse to fund the project unless those liens would be released? Doesn't that make common sense to everybody? One way to stop what's happening is don't allow the projects to be built in the first place. It is the builder who says, I'm going to do this. Therefore, one of the avenues that I'm attempting to take right now is to get banks to stop loaning on projects where there's homeowners associations. I invite you to encourage them to do the same. I'm reminded that now, in 2013, coming off the heels of an enormous collapse in the housing market, that possibly the banks are more aware now than ever before of the liability that they're being stuck with when the individual homeowner can't pay the bill. There is no other bill like this. There's no other fee like this where banks are responsible, except with homeowners associations, liens, and super liens. It could be that the solution to this problem exists in the hands of the banks so that they'll be loaning on contracts where this isn't possible. Okay. I want to speak to you a little bit about solution, and one that I myself cannot understand. But I am researching it and I am looking into it. I'm going to ask you to do the same. The only reason that HOAs can exist is if they're built as common area interest communities. Common interest communities. Now, to do this, the banks have to loan the money for the builder to do this. The builder must say in front, this is going to be an HOA. Now, right now, the thought might be in your mind, well, so what's the bank got to do with it? And here's the problem. Banks all over the country, I cannot speak from other parts of the world, are being hit with foreclosure fees and charges being left by owners where there's a lien on the property. And because the lien stays with the property, even the bank has to pay for it. So I pose a question to you that I've not been able to answer. If you were Bank of America, if you were Chase, if you were Wells Fargo, wouldn't you refuse to fund the project unless those liens would be released? Doesn't that make common sense to everybody? One way to stop what's happening is don't allow the projects to be built in the first place. It is the builder who says, I'm going to do this. Therefore, one of the avenues I want to mention another solution, or at least certainly a recognition. None of the problems in HOAs exist as it relates to the abuse unless the HOA themselves hire the collection company and the management company. Quick solution? Self-manage. You may not know this, but you have the right to self-manage your community. But over time, it simply got out of hand, and you think that you have no right. You do. If you are going to buy into an HOA, and I strongly recommend that you don't, but make sure that that HOA is self-managed. If you're going to buy into an HOA, knock on doors in the community. Ask them how they feel about their HOA. Did you spend the time to do that when you bought your home? It's unlikely. Here's something you may not know. If I decide to buy a product, I want to go ahead and test it out. I want to test drive in my new car. Let me go ahead and have a sample of that. When you want to buy a home in an HOA and you want to know how your HOA functions, you're not allowed in those meetings until after you sign the document. And once you've signed, there's no turning back. Be careful. Be careful and spend the time to do the research. I want to explain a little bit about the CC&Rs and the government documents in general, and this you need to be completely aware of. What you agree to today may change tomorrow. That is, in most contracts, the contract doesn't change during the term of the contract. Yes, it is true, the interest rate on your credit card might go up, but you've agreed to that. But in the case of homeowners associations, you need to know that what you bought into today can change tomorrow. And therefore, if you look at your homeowners association, or what the government rules and regulations are, those are constantly changing. And in the next presentation, I'm going to explain why. I've talked to you about the management companies, and I've tried to give you some general explanation of what their role is. I've explained to you that the HOA itself, your homeowners association, is a non-profit organization, although they tend to operate as if they're profit-making. That is, in time, many organizations view fines and fees as a way of making money. This was unintended when this process began. And there's no one there monitoring them, stopping them from doing this. So if the HOA decides that they want to increase their reserve fund, simply go ahead and produce more fines. But there's an enormous problem tied to the management companies and the collection companies, and here's how it works. I've shown you before that this is the HOA, and for simplicity purposes, this is the management company. They have a contract. That contract is for, let's say, $30,000. Now I'm going to sidestep for a moment and say that most of you work and you have a job and you work hard and one day you walk in and your supervisor says you're getting a raise, and it's your annual raise. It's your 6%. It's your whatever. But management companies don't function that way. They've entered into an agreement with the HOA, and that's their fee. How are they going to give themselves a raise? Well, I'm going to support you in making sure that you send out a lot of letters, because I get to charge fees for sending out those letters. And I'm going to make sure that we cause this neighbor to do this or that. And we're going to stay on it. And when I can pass this over to the collection company, the more they get, the bigger the raise. There is absolutely no desire on the part of these organizations to have a community that's running 100% well. There's no money in it. What money would the collection agency make if there was nothing to collect? I want people in collection. I want people in default. What more money would the management company make if there weren't letters to send out? I'm going to give you an example of at least one neighborhood to show you how this is done. You may then apply it to your own neighborhood. This particular neighborhood is a gated community. It had been around for about 12 years. And I had gone out of my way to study as many communities as I could relative to this process. Now, they need to increase the profits inside the management company as well as the collection company. So what they did was they passed a new rule that said nobody with a commercial vehicle could park in their own driveway or on the street, or it's going to cost you $100 every 2 weeks. Additionally, we'll tow it away. So you are someone who's owned in that community for 10 years. And you now get this letter, and the rules have changed. Now that vehicle, that van, that cleaning van, that delivery van, whatever it is, it's a car. It's not a long-haul truck. It's a vehicle you can't have in your driveway. And you can't have in front of your house. And now the management company has given themselves an enormous raise. But it gets better. You see, after they passed that rule, they realized they could make more money if they got specific about the exact height of the vehicle and the width of the vehicle and the wheel space between the vehicle. And so they started becoming more and more technical. And with each technicality, another fine was created. Now I know that if you're listening, you can apply this to your own HOA. I'm simply using this as an example that under normal circumstances, if you're working for a company, the company gives you a raise because of increased profits in production. The increased profits in productions here are fining the homeowners. I want to speak to you a little bit about solution, and one that I myself cannot understand. But I am researching it and I am looking into it. I'm going to ask you to do the same. The only reason that HOAs can exist is if they're built as common area interest communities. Common interest communities. Now, to do this, the banks have to loan the money for the builder to do this. The builder must say in front, this is going to be an HOA. Now, right now, the thought might be in your mind, well, so what's the bank got to do with it? And here's the problem. Banks all over the country, I cannot speak from other parts of the world, are being hit with foreclosure fees and charges being left by owners where there's a lien on the property. And because the lien stays with the property, even the bank has to pay for it. So I pose a question to you that I've not been able to answer. If you were Bank of America, if you were Chase, if you were Wells Fargo, wouldn't you refuse to fund the project unless those liens would be released? Doesn't that make common sense to everybody? One way to stop what's happening is don't allow the projects to be built in the first place. It is the builder who says, I'm going to do this. Therefore, one of the avenues that I'm attempting to take right now is to get banks to stop loaning on projects where there's homeowners associations. I invite you to encourage them to do the same. I'm reminded that now, in 2013, coming off the heels of an enormous collapse in the housing market, that possibly the banks are more aware now than ever before of the liability that they're being stuck with when the individual homeowner can't pay the bill. There is no other bill like this. There's no other fee like this where banks are responsible, except with homeowners associations, liens, and super liens. It could be that the solution to this problem exists in the hands of the banks so that they'll be loaning on contracts where this isn't possible. Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about a problem that I doubt that anybody is aware of. And just recently, I was able to do more and more research on it. Let me cut to the chase. Super priority liens. Now, many of you know that in your homeowners association, you can be liened. Your property can be liened because you didn't pay your association dues, because you didn't, because you had a weed and you got fined and it's sent over to collection and so on. Fees and costs liened against the property. What you may not know is that in some places, such as in the state of Nevada, we have what is called a super priority lien. What this means is that the liens that are placed on the property go before any and all other liens, any and all other encumbrances. In fact, if you have a homestead on your property, an attempt to cover you for anything that might relate to bankruptcy or someone trying to seize your home, that super priority lien usurps that particular document. Now, here's the extraordinary thing that I recently just found out. The banks themselves don't know what it is. So I would go to a real estate agent and I would say, before I buy this piece of property, I would like to have the super priority lien waived off of my property. They didn't know what it was. I would call a bank. I don't want to borrow money on a piece of property where there's a super priority lien. Well, what is it? What are these liens? The question that is asked is, why don't the banks know The banks themselves are now becoming very aggressive about all the money they're having to pay. Let me explain why. Mr. and Mrs. Smith lose their property. They lose their property to foreclosure for whatever reason. What's left on the property is the liens from the HOA. As a result of those liens, the property cannot pass to anybody else unless those liens are paid or the new buyer wants to assume the encumbrances. Now, the banks are actually suing HOAs for this. They're actually suing HOAs for this. But why in the world are they continuing to loan money on property where they know they're going to have to pick up the bill at the end? Solution: banks, stop loaning money on HOA property. Just stop. And once that happens, they will be dead in their tracks because they can't move the real estate. Once that happens, those liens now will stop happening because the very homeowners that are on the boards are now going to stop creating those problems because those homeowners can't sell their property when it comes time for them to leave the neighborhood. Stop the liens, stop the super priority, and banks, stop loaning money on property that's in homeowners associations. I want to talk to you a little bit about bank funding. Another extraordinary experience that I had in my research, I began to look at why in the world are banks funding construction projects where there are homeowners associations. I've already discussed the concept that the bank gets stuck with the bill when there's a lien. But right out of the gate, when the plans are drawn for the construction of the community, the bank knows that they're loaning money on a homeowners association. Why in the world would they do that? And I actually am putting that question out there to you. I don't know why they're continuing to do this. If I'm the president of the bank, if I'm the CEO, I'm not going to loan money on something where it's going to come back to haunt me. I'm going to put a stop to it. I'm going to say to the contractor, you want to build a community? Don't make it an HOA community. I'll loan you for the construction. And then it stops. It goes away. It puts an end to it. Stop loaning money on communities that are designed and being built as HOAs. They're going to come back and haunt you. Some of you may or may not be aware of how the procedure goes for HOA meetings, but let me give you a quick overview. Usually once a month, sometimes every other month, in some communities every third month, meetings come together for members of the community. The purpose of the meetings is to discuss issues, problems, things that are going to be going on, the wall that's going to be being built, the garden that's going to be planted. In these meetings, I often find there to be a great deal of hostility. I have watched meetings go into yelling matches. I have watched meetings where the police had to be called. I am aware of meetings where people have gone in and become violent, and I am aware of meetings where people have gone in and shot board members. Those individuals are currently in jail, and it is my intent to join those cases in an attempt to explain to the courts why these people did what they did. But what you may not know is there's something called an executive board meeting. This is extraordinary. These are your neighbors in a meeting discussing things about you that you can't attend and you can't know about, and the members of the board have to assign themselves to secrecy about the content of that meeting. So this information remains completely private from you. You have no idea what they've decided. In these meetings, they could decide to hire an attorney to sue or go after another member of the community. The cost of that to you, the individual homeowner, thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. The cost of hiring that attorney because someone left their trash can out. Now, I cannot prove about what I'm about to say, but I believe that much of that agenda is about setting people up so that they are fined, ultimately sent to collection companies, and ultimately that collection bill, which was now before $200, is now $2,000. And before that individual can have clear title without that lien, he or she or they have to pay it. Now keep in mind, the collection company doesn't own any real estate in that division. The management company doesn't own any real estate in that division, but they profit off the individual homeowner who lives in it. This is a huge problem. How do we stop this? If HOAs for just 3 years, would stop sending out fines and liens on homeowners, their fellow residents, the collection companies and the management companies would fall to their knees because there would be no income. Their income is parasitic off of you. They can't make a living unless you fail. These are the kinds of things that are taking place in the executive board. You need to know. Each community has the right to have board members representing them. When a community is at its origin, the developer represents a part of that board at the beginning, and at some point along the way, it's turned over to members of the community. Those members of the community, it could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 7, any number of people decided on what are known as the C, and Rs. They identify what the board is made of. They then are elected to that board. How are they elected? Members of the community are sent ballots. In most cases, most people don't know anyone on those ballots. In most cases, people don't respond to them. So the return on those ballots is very, very minimal. And at the beginning, things go pretty smoothly. But that doesn't last for more than a year or two. Because eventually, those people who get on the board, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes get on the board because they're getting a great deal of pleasure having authority over you. Now, history tells us that this has been the case. Wars, countries, communities, states, counties, having authority over others is paramount. Major study called the Whitehall study out of England showed the following. People who are in higher positions suffer less stress-related and health illnesses. You want to stay healthy? You want to lower your stress? What you do is put yourself in a position of power, authority over others. It is with this authority that people are attracted to the board, not all. But this represents the typical model that I see, where there is a board of 7, the campaign takes place, people are tired of the fines and the fees, they campaign, and 4 people end up on the board and stay on the board. There is no length of time that you can stay on a board. You could be there for life. Unlike the President of the United States, maximum 2 terms, Congress, maximum term, any number of things, but not HOA boards. Those 4 out of the 7 are pro-fines, pro-liens, pro-foreclosures. The other 3 are not. Those 3 are always voted out. They are lame ducks on the board and serve only a technical purpose that it requires that 7 people be on the board. As of the date of this recording, indictments have gone out all over the country. A number of indictments in Nevada for the corruptions related to HOA boards. Our problem is this: the solution isn't taking place fast enough. These people aren't being held responsible fast enough. So along the way, homes are being foreclosed on. Those foreclosed on homes are being bought, and we believe, but right now cannot prove, that the homes are being purchased in part by board members or their friends. A new term for us here is a term called equity theft. Let me explain equity theft to you. First of all, it has now become an act. In other words, the Equity Theft Act to prevent it. Simply stated, people or organizations go after someone's equity in their home and they steal it. Now, one way to steal it is go to them, hey, I'll put a mortgage on your property, a second mortgage, sign the paper right here, we'll get that money for you. Lo and behold, before you know it, you've actually signed over your property, they get the money, and you're left with the debt on that property and never having received the money. Or the fees and charges tied to that loan were so extraordinary that your equity is now gone. This is known as equity theft. More and more indictments are taking place regarding this. I want to suggest, and possibly be the first to suggest, that the following is true: that equity theft is taking place in homeowners associations. And here's how it's done. Mr. and Mrs. Jones own a piece of property. Mr. and Mrs. Jones pay their payments on their mortgage. They're good people. They're people who stay on their payments. But lo and behold, they left their garage door open one day. And lo and behold, they received a letter, and lo and behold, the letter never got to them, and lo and behold, they now have a fine on that property. And they say, what are you talking about? My garage door wasn't open, and the HOA board says, oh, yes, it was, and oh, by the way, here's another $100 fine, and another $100 fine, and another $100 fine, and now the homeowners are angry, and by God, they're not going to pay it. And their recourse is nothing. And so the bill mounts. They've been told that they could go to their local ombudsmans if they fill out a form and read this and read that, but it's so overwhelming and so disturbing that very few people act, and most of these ombuds decisions go in the favor of the HOA. This is equity theft, in my humble opinion. That is, for every $100 bill that comes in, and every $100 I have to take out of my pocket to pay for that fine, pulls equity away from my house. Now you multiply that and shift that by the variations on the theme. You need to make your wall higher, make it lower. You need to change this portion of your grass to that. I want you to paint your house. Oh no, you painted it the wrong color. I want you to do this. These decisions are all made by your current board member, people living in the community. Who makes the profit off of it? The management companies and the collection companies, once that bill arrives in their hand. A bad day for a management company and a collection company, a bad day is a day where a fine is not issued. Can you imagine what would happen to those companies if fines stopped for the 3 years? No collections, no fines, simply pay your dues, and we stop all the problems. What a per individual needs to know before they go into a homeowners association is that you're going to be charged an assessment for living there. Now, to give you a full picture on this, as a tax-paying citizen in whatever state you're in, you've already been assessed. You're already paying taxes. You're paying property taxes. You paid taxes on your car. You register your car. It's tax, tax, tax. But now you move into a specific community called an HOA, and now it's called an assessment. You already paid tax. You're going to pay tax on that property. That property tax is to cover the streets and the lights and the maintenance of the community, but that money doesn't go for that. The city doesn't have to come and do it because your assessments on your property will now do it. How much are those assessments? Oh, I've seen them as low as $40 a year. They're kind, they're gentle assessments. They're meant to simply pay for the cost of bookkeeping or things such as this. But there are places where assessments are $500, $600, $700 per month. In some cases, those assessments are greater in cost than the actual mortgage on the home. And those assessments go to pay for the management company and the collection company and common area maintenance, things such as this. It is unlikely that you knew that these assessments were going to be what they were and were as high. But if you did, you probably didn't know this. Those assessments can be raised at any time. So you move into a community, you accept the assessments, lo and behold, you get a bill, and oops, you are now responsible for more in assessments. But oh no, wait a minute. You're also now responsible for the special assessment. But wait a minute, it gets better. You see, some of the communities you move in have what they call master associations. The master association oversees the sub-association. So you now don't just pay one HOA, you pay 2 HOAs. And one HOA can sue another HOA. One HOA can override the decision of another HOA. And while the individual homeowner has satisfied that HOA that they thought they moved in, they can get a letter from the Master Association saying, we don't care what they said, we don't like it. Remove it. Don't do it. The Master Association is, in my opinion, an offensive concept. As a psychologist, I'm here to tell you the use of the word master is something that is an abomination. The use of the word master takes us back to a time in our history where people owned other people. And the truth is, when you moved into an HOA, they own you. And the only way you can get out is if you find someone to take over your position, or you walk away from the property and abandon it. And what many of you don't know is that to get out of your HOA, you're going to have to pay to get out. Not pay your real estate fees, not pay for the garbage. You're going to have to pay your HOA to leave it. Money in, money out. I have said several times during these presentations, as well as upon opening up the file, you understood that I'm not an attorney. I now make a quick recommendation to you. Any check that you write to your HOA, put in the memorandum section, paid under protest. Why? Because it is a document that a court will acknowledge that you paid, that you didn't want to pay, but you felt that you were harassed or forced. If you want to sue for it after the fact and don't note that, it makes the argument difficult but not impossible. Write paid under protest, or should I say, I write paid under protest. It gives you an opportunity to take action if that's what you want to do. Having done this now for a number of years, one of the common themes that comes back is fear of retaliation. Will my HOA retaliate against me for writing on my check paid under protest? Will my HOA retaliate against me by sending me more fines? I'm going to be completely honest with you and tell you and remind you that in my humble opinion, the people on these boards, some of them are ill. They're emotionally ill. They're suffering from antisocial personality disorder. Most specifically, antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features. Add the combination to antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features and Asperger's, and you have a recipe for disaster. Therefore, in the hands of people who are ill, they love retaliation. Is it possible that by taking care of yourself and writing paid under protest that you will be retaliated against? Yes. But you must understand that you have now taken the first step of taking care of yourself, because the statutes, at least to my knowledge in all states, say that you may not be retaliated against by the board members, the executive committee, the management company, or the collection companies. With that, you have ammunition, and here's how it works. I will use myself as an example. I do this all the time. I receive a fine. I don't want to pay it, but I can't stop it. I can't, if I file what's known as an intervention affidavit with the ombudsman, it's sent to them, but it could take months, if not years, to be heard. Along the way, the fine keeps on continuing. $100 every 2 weeks, $200 a month, $2,400 a year before I'm heard. And when I'm heard by someone where what they say doesn't necessarily have validity or stick. But what I can do is this. I get the $100 fine. I pay it under protest. I send a demand letter to my HOA demanding they return the money. If they don't return the money, I'm now in small claims court. And now they're going to be before a judge explaining themselves. Might the judge say you need to do an intervention affidavit? He might, she might. Might the judge be willing to hear? They might. But this is absolutely true. You have cost them a great deal of time. And in small claims court, at least here in Nevada, you can't be held responsible for legal fees. What's the message that the HOA gets? Leave this guy alone, because he's going to cost us more money than we're going to make. Stand up for yourself. Do something. Take action. This kind of retaliation is being looked at across the country. If you do it and report it, it adds to the pile. And with that pile, people can begin to do something. One of the biggest nightmares related to homeowners associations are foreclosures. Now, in case you're not familiar with just kind of general language, a foreclosure means that a document is filed with the courthouse and your house goes up, usually for auction, and someone then or the bank buys back the house. At the time of this recording, enormous lawsuits are going on against banks for having illegally foreclosed. But this discussion specifically looks at homeowners associations. Okay, you haven't paid your fine. Can you be foreclosed on for not paying a fine? No. You cannot be foreclosed on for not paying a fine for a weed, for a garage, for a door, for a crack, for whatever. That's a fine, but you can have that fine accumulated and the property liened. Once the property's sold, the HOA gets paid for it. Call it money in the bank. And it's great money in the bank because you see it accumulates more fines and more interest. I will show you later on examples of fines placed by HOAs where the fine was $100, but the fee for not paying it was $25. And then it compounds to $50 and $75 and $100 and so on. Now, if you don't pay your HOA dues, you can be foreclosed upon. Let me give you an example in its worst case. You own your home outright. Your home is worth $300,000. You're on vacation and you've neglected to pay your dues. Oops. Slipped by you. You get a letter. You didn't pay us. There's going to be a problem here. And for whatever reason, you don't or you didn't pay. You're angry now. You're upset. And with that non-payment now becomes a series of fines. But these fines can now cause you to go into foreclosure. Let us assume for a moment that your dues were $300. You don't pay it, and now you have fines against those dues of $400. And you still didn't pay it. You lost your job. You're ill. Any number of things could have happened. You're angry, whatever the reason is. And now your local HOA and collection company, they do a search and they find out you own your home. You're one valuable member of the community. Not to the community, but to the collection company, the HOA, and the management company. Because they want to accelerate your home into foreclosure. So the next thing that happens, you get a letter from the collection company. And oops, that $400 bill is now $2,500. You're living on a fixed income. You don't have $2,500 to pay. But if you don't, they will foreclose on you. And once that foreclosure happens, you no longer have right to the property, and they can arrange for the constable to come out and have you removed. Who gets the property? In my opinion, in my humble opinion, these properties are filtered into the hands of friends, family, and business people that are waiting for this to foreclose on, like predators. Like predators. The groups most likely to have this happen: single mothers with children, the elderly, those individuals in the community that are ill, and those individuals, young and old alike, who own high equity in their home. Equity theft. And it's legal. It's legal. It is so critical that this be stopped. And we can stop it if we get together and work to stop it through a series of means that I will talk about later on. I'd like to talk to you about collection companies. First, let's understand. Collection companies are businesses. They're not members of the community. They don't live in the community. They have no interest whatsoever in that community except for one thing. They make their money off of fines and fees. I've said before, a bad day for a collection company is when they don't get a notice in from an HOA saying, "Go after Bill, he owes us money." Yay! We're making money now. Well, the truth is these collection companies receive hundreds of notices from HOA saying, "Go after our fellow neighbor. Get him for us. He had a weed. Get him. He left his door open. Get him. His kids were out on the front lawn. Get him. He left his trash can out. He doesn't have the right landscaping. His house needs to be painted. His window's open. It should be open. His light is out in his front lawn. He left his car out too long." And on and on and on. And this is worse inside gated communities, where they can fine you for far more things that actually, for the purpose of this recording, go beyond your imagination. The collection company is a business and has one interest and one interest only: make money. Although it's disguised in, "We'll collect the money for you, HOA of America, and we'll send you a check when we get it." So they get that $2,500 check. They send the $200 that's owed to the HOA, and they put the $2,300 in their pocket. Now I'm going to also now say another personal opinion. I believe that the collection companies incentivize certain people to make sure that they get those letters. And that the incentives that go out to people possibly on the board and possibly with the management company. Tracking those dollars is very difficult. But we're now beginning to look at possibilities of racketeering and other forms of corruption. It is unfortunate that as people are listening to this right now, some of them are HOA management companies and collection companies, and they're laughing. And they're laughing because you can't do anything. You can't stop us. And when that kind of narcissism takes place, mixed with the corruption, we have a recipe for disaster. And I'm going to explain why. In my work, I have tried to, on numerous occasions, explain to officials, police, government agencies, we're looking at the potential of violence here. We're looking at people being hurt at a greater rate than they currently are. It's not an argument at the HOA meeting. It's not a fight in the parking lot. It's not an egg against the house. It's not a dog defecating on someone's property purposely. Not that level of violence. We're talking about the kind of violence where people get hurt and killed. But here's what you don't know. Here is what the management companies and the collection companies could care less about. I don't think it's the homeowners that are going to escalate the level of violence. I believe it's their children. History has shown us that as time passes and the children get older, they begin to take revenge for what their parents went through. So we're looking at raising a generation of children who remember the tears that their family cried, who remembered what their parents said they went through, and are now old enough. Do you think they're going to want to buy a home in an HOA? Do you think that they're going to drive through that HOA and not want to take revenge? We have case after case worldwide where it's the children who take revenge, not the primary family, because they're too overwhelmed and oftentimes too old. The government, if you're listening, you are being foolish to overlook the children. You needn't worry about the families who own the homes, the adults. You need to worry about the children growing older, because they're going to retaliate. And in my humble opinion, that retaliation is going to come in the form of killings, beatings, and the burning of houses. There is not enough people power to surround every HOA board member, every HOA collection company, every HOA, and every HOA management company. And it still won't work, even if that happened. There's going to be increased violence. There's going to be more deaths. This has to stop. I want to talk to you about an almost philosophical concept, and this concept relates to morals, ethics, and values. When we talk about a moral imperative, it simply means this. I know the difference between right and wrong because I can feel it. I know it. I know what's wrong. The person who knows it and does it anyway is the individual who lacks the morals. The individual who has the morals and doesn't act and will act on that knowledge is a person with a moral imperative. I will give you an example. I will use myself. It is not my intent to be heavenly up here. I go through a grocery store line. She gives me back too much money. I'm a professor. I ask this of my students. Do you give them back the money? Oh, no, that was her mistake. The moral imperative says, I know that it's wrong. Here's the money back. I'm at a restaurant. The waitress forgets to charge me for the cup of coffee. It's only $1.25. Do I tell the waitress? The answer is I do. I tell the waitress. The moral imperative is about me. It's not about her. It's what I can live with. And I can't live with that. And so I'm going to suggest you to the following. That to have a functioning HOA, that HOA must consist of board members who have morals, values, and ethics. And with those morals, values, and ethics, they will stop what's going on in the communities. They won't allow it to go on. With those morals, values, and ethics, they will say, you know what? We don't need to do this to our neighbors. I don't want to hurt other people. And they're getting nudged by the management company. Hey, but what about us? We need a few bucks here. No, you're on your own. In fact, I think we can manage the community on our own. You're fired. And when they're fired, so's the collection company. And look at the beauty behind this. You see, if the community, for instance, is paying $30,000 plus costs to a management company, you take the $30,000 and you throw it into the community. Fix the street. Hire someone to drive around and pick up the trash. Pull a weed. Paint a gate. All year long. That will be less than the cost of the management company. And the management company knows it. It's a best kept dirty secret. You see, it would require the management company employees and individuals and owners to have the morals, values, and ethics to say to you, you don't need us. Take the money and put it for a better purpose. You thinking about buying an HOA? You think this is going to be a wonderful, great thing, and it looks good. And you decide you want to sell a few of your items, a couch, a table, maybe a few shirts and dresses. Maybe your kid has grown out of that skateboard. So you want to put out a garage sale. No. You've given up that right. You've given up the right to have the garage sale when you want it, though many communities have planned garage sales, usually once or twice a year. The logic, by the way, to not having garage sales when you want them, I quote, having garage sales bring undesirable people into the community. When I asked what an undesirable was, the answer is, you know them. I have no idea what you're talking about. You're talking about me? Undesirable me? Are you talking about you when you go into somebody else's neighborhood? Are you the undesirable? This notion that people are coming into the neighborhood that are undesirable becomes the issue for the garage sale, along with the fact that your neighbor isn't real happy that you're having a garage sale. Maybe your possessions, but you can't sell them now. But the most appalling of all things related to this are the estate sales. A family member has died, and now the other family member has died, and now that house and its contents are going up for the estate sale. The family wishes to sell the belongings. The estate sale is oftentimes run by an organization. That's what they do. It is not uncommon. I have been there. I have seen it. I've been on the premises when the people doing the estate sale are harassed by HOA board members. These people just died. The family's left with the goods, and now you're going to harass that family for selling the belongings? Is this what you want to be a party to? Well, the people who do the harassing will report, I have heard it. I love doing that to them. I get a sense of power and strength. I get excited doing that to them. And then they go back and they write it up in their journal and they send it to the management company to be sure to send off to now the heirs that they have broken the CC&Rs and may be fined. Their family just died, and now they get a punitive letter instead of a letter that says, we're sorry to hear of your loss. What can we do to help you through this process? This is enormously disturbing. One of the things that's very difficult to talk about as it relates to common interest communities are known as the CC&Rs. The CC&Rs basically is the rule book by which the community is run. Every community has a different set of CC&Rs. There's no fixed document. Although most of them are about the same, they all vary from document to document. The other thing is that those CC&Rs are quite thick. I've seen them as thick as 2 and 3 inches. You now want to buy into an HOA. I'm excited. This is great. I'm ready to sign the papers. Here's the CC&Rs. Sign off on them. And you signed off on a document that said you read it. But you didn't. In the same way that you don't read your insurance policy, in the same way that you don't read the instructions on how to put the vacuum cleaner together, you just put it together. But it's there. And now once you've signed off on it, you have signed off on your rights as a United States citizen. And you've now entered into another country, whatever community you're living in. Those CC&Rs now govern your life. And you may or may not know the following. The moment that you sign your papers, your property was liened and will remain that way until you leave. Not a filed lien, but you've given them the right to do so. Your money, and you've given them the right to do so. Now, I'll add a little something to this, just so you know, which to me is one of the also more appalling components of buying the home with a CC&R. Let us assume for a moment that the family before you had some kind of infraction. Let's say the infraction was that the frames of the windows needed to be painted. And they've been fined for that. And to leave the community, they're now going to pay $3,000 in fines because they never painted the windows. You're the new buyer. You've signed on the dotted line, and you were never informed about this infraction. And within a month, if not sooner, of you going into that community, you're now going to get a letter that says your trim on your windows needs to be painted. You weren't informed. You never knew. You have already purchased a property that is defective. And now the income stream starts again. You've got to ask yourself, is this where you want to live? Is this the kind of lifestyle you want? I've been a psychotherapist for many years and an educator at a college for most of those years. In those years, I've done numerous lectures on bullying and harassment. It's unlikely that any of us out here have not seen bullying, been a victim of bullying, and been a participant in bullying. In my opinion, HOA environments are ripe and rampant with bullying. People driving through the neighborhoods, looking at your houses, pointing fingers. We're going to get you. You're this, you're that. Let's get them. And if you're someone that they don't like, they're going after you. And they're going to bully you. And they're going to push you. And they're going to harass you. And if you try to retaliate, they're going to run into the other room, grab the CC&Rs and go, oh no, you can't touch me. I've been given the right to do that to you. And they're absolutely correct. Your government has given them the right to do that to you. Now, I will tell you that most of these documents use the word reasonable. The word reasonable appears throughout the document. The problem is that no one knows what the word means. And so while it was a very clever thing to say, we'll be reasonable about this, they're not, because no one knows what it means. The bullying and the harassment take place, and I will argue personally that I believe that this is also extortion. That as a result of the bullying, as a result of the harassment, that this is, in my humble opinion, extortion. And communities are being extorted, and homeowners are being extorted by HOAs, by collection companies, by management companies. I've talked to you earlier about HOA syndrome, the syndrome that people get specifically from living in HOAs. Now, this is laughable to some, as I've said, and this makes no sense, and oh, you just made that up. And the answer is, as a result of research, yes, I created or identified something that previously didn't exist because it didn't exist. But it does exist now. HOA syndrome, in my opinion, is real. HOA syndrome is going to make its way into the psychiatric community, and HOA syndrome is going to make its way into the courtrooms. HOA syndrome, at the root of it, is harassment. And the ultimate outcome that a person lives in is constant state of fear. I'm afraid to leave my home. I'm afraid to let my kids play outside. I'm afraid to have people over. I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. And that fear induces enormous stress. Now, in the name of science, we know that that stress is harmful to you. It will impair your health. And yet we continue to harm people with it. The more you stay afraid, the more stress you're under. The more stress you're under, the more impaired your health becomes. This isn't made-up science. This is long-term, longitudinal studies. We are communities of people who are under enormous stress. And you know the way I can release my stress? Put stress on you. The less stress I have on me, the more stress I have in you. And you know how I'm going to do it? I'm going to become a member of the HOA board, which will give me the authority to put stress on you, which will lower my stress, and I'm going to enjoy myself. Fear. I want to talk a little bit about why doesn't the government intercede. This is my opinion. I don't know the answer to this fully, but I believe I have a fairly good understanding. At the beginning, the legislative bodies believed that they were doing a good thing. We're going to create guidelines. We're going to create rules and statutes that will help govern these communities. But year after year, people with dubious intent got together and they twisted those words around. And year after year, they were voted into the legislature. This is not new in politics. This is, since the beginning of time, things get twisted around so that they're now harmful instead of hurtful. One only has to look at the history of World War I, World War II, the peoples that were affected by this, the people that were slaughtered. It was a political process, and it remains as such. I believe that the legislature is in so deep now that there's no way out. I can recall going up to the governor of Nevada and asking to speak and talk with him about the problem. And within a matter of a half a second, he brushed me away and said, go talk to your HOA. And the reason that that happened is that he knew he has no power. He knows it's out of control. There is a solution. But doing it the way we're doing now is not going to resolve that problem. I'd like to talk about the children that are in our HOAs. The children in the home owned in an HOA. Like anything that you can remember as an adult, go back to your childhood. Do you remember the time you saw your mom and dad arguing? Do you remember the time that you came home and you lost your job, or maybe were in an accident, or the car broke down? Stress, stress, stress. And the children feel it, and they know it, but they have no power to do anything about it. Now there's a new one on the block. And now this is the constant stress that comes from an HOA. And the children hear the parents talking about the fine that they got, and they can't do this, and I'm not going to take that, and on and on and on. But as the weeks and months pass, the children hear it's the same old thing. The same letters, the same problem, nothing's happening about it, and it's not going away. Are the children being stressed by it? Absolutely. Absolutely they're being stressed. And I'll take it one step further. We know that in utero, pregnant women who are under stress give birth to children with more problems. Is it reasonable for us to believe, not having access to the research materials, specifically in HOAs, is it reasonable for us to believe that it is dangerous for someone who is pregnant to live in a homeowners association? And I will argue, given the current information, that being pregnant in a homeowners association is dangerous. Many of you have received letters from your HOA. And one thing that is typically characteristic of them is the nature of the letter. The nature of the letter does not say, "Howdy, neighbor. I'm so-and-so from your HOA board. I live right down the street. I like you, love my neighborhood. I was wondering, would you be willing to go ahead and make sure that your trash cans are brought in at the end of trash day? I'd sure appreciate it." Sincerely. But it doesn't. It starts out of the gate. You are on notice. You're going to be fined. The CC&R section such and such and such state the following. This is why these organizations are often referred to as the neo-Nazis. Because they sound like it, they act like it, and much to my surprise, they're not wearing uniforms. But I believe that's coming. I believe that HOAs are soon going to now have their own uniforms. You'll be able to recognize them. Instead of there being a swastika, the armband will read HOA. And these punitive letters are intended to induce fear, anger, and disturb. They're intended to hurt you. I want to talk to you about what is known as the Ombudsman's Office. And they are a organization that is intended to protect the homeowner as well as the HOA. They are an equal and fair rights advocate group. It is, in my opinion, that this process has completely failed. I'll give you an example by using Nevada, specifically Clark County, as an example. We have police stations all around our city. We have fire departments around our city. We have hospitals around our city. We have thousands of people who support the city. We have one ombudsman's office. And if we try to attempt to get through to them and to get a question answered, well, I can only talk from personal experience. I was treated as if I was just an annoyance, just taking up time in their day, and they did not have time for me. Because the truth of the matter is, their jobs are dependent on the existence of the HOAs, not the disbanding of them. And I have not seen a single experience myself where the Ombudsman has intervened quickly, without exception. And I'll give you an example. About a week ago, I was at an ombudsman's meeting to hear about the rules. And during that meeting, I raised my hand and asked the question, how does the Ombudsman's office want us to handle threat of someone's health, safety, and welfare against their life. How would you like us to handle it? And the response to that is, well, we don't handle those kind of things. You need to call the police. So you're going to create the rules and laws, and you're going to support the rules and laws that cause the action, and now you want us to call the police? Well, let me tell you what happens. These events can only be solved unless the event has taken place. Speaking now as a psychotherapist and a mental health care professional, we are oftentimes the first who are questioned about, why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you warn us about that shooting? Why didn't you tell us it was coming? And when we try and warn, it's we can't do anything, nothing's happened. And when it happens, then they come to us and say, why don't you do something? In short, it appears to me that everybody has washed their hands of this. And that a lucky day in an HOA is a day where there's no violence.